Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Ethiopian and Somali troops seize key stronghold of Al-Shabab. Violence in Syria kills prominent citizen journalist and 2 foreign correspondents. And Yemeni activists renew demand for Saleh's prosecution. Mosaic, world news from the Middle East, begins now.
The UN Security Council unanimously adopted a resolution to increase the number of African Union troops in Somalia from 12,000 to around 17,700. Meanwhile, Somali government forces, backed by Ethiopian military units, took control of the city of Berdale, located 60 kilometers from Baidoa, the stronghold of Al-Shabab, the militant Islamist Mujahideen youth movement. This comes after the forces launched an offensive to surround al-Shabab fighters from several directions and end their control of central and southern Somalia. British Prime Minister David Cameron said militant Islamists in Somalia remain his main concern in the country. Cameron's statement comes before a conference hosted by London begins tomorrow. The international summit will discuss Somali issues. Representatives from over 50 countries and international organizations are expected to attend the summit.
2 decades of conflict and chaos. Somalia has been without a central government for over 20 years. As for the interim government, it is present in the capital Mogadishu under the protection of a peacekeeping delegation from the African Union. This government's term ends in August and is facing many challenges, most notably to take control of the capital Mogadishu and the remaining Somali regions. The expiration of the interim government's term is a source of concern for Somalis and also for the international community.
It matters desperately for the Somali people themselves that we make progress, but it also matters for the rest of the world. And while the problems are very deep and the challenges are very great, I do see some signs of progress.
However, the challenges remain significant. Somalia is marred by violence, especially with the presence of the Somali al-Shabab movement that recently announced it will join al-Qaeda. The movement withdrew its fighters from the capital last August, but it still controls large areas in central and southern Somalia. Since 2006, Al-Shabab al-Mujahideen movement has been fighting to topple the fragile interim government in Somalia, a country torn by war and exhausted by famine. Though African Union forces announced they managed to push al-Shabaab's forces out of Mogadishu, there are fears the Somali al-Shabaab movement could have an influence abroad. Britain specifically expressed concern over the issue.
I think the security threat is real. It is substantial. It's based on the fact that Al-Shabaab is an organization that has now explicitly linked itself to Al-Qaeda. It encourages violent jihad, not just in Somalia, but also outside Somalia. There is a real danger that young British Somalis could have their minds poisoned by this organization. So there is a terrorist threat that is current today, and if we're not careful, it could get worse.
In addition, pirates on the Somali coast cause a constant security concern. Somalia is also suffering from a food crisis after the most severe drought in 60 years hit the country. All these deeply rooted issues in Somalia pose a challenge to the international community, which is counting on a conference to be held in the British capital, London, to discuss the problems in Somalia, a country described as the most failed state in the world. Yala Zahardin, BBC.
Keeping track of the death toll caused by the violence and crackdown is now a daily mission for the regime's opponents and political rights activists in Syria.
The enormous loss of life is clear when taking into account the collective number. This was evident in the latest report by the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The report said the organization registered the names of 7,500 individuals killed since the protest movement started in March of last year. And as usual, civilians paid the heaviest price. 5,542 civilians were killed.
The rest, 2,029 army and security forces were killed, including over 400 soldiers who defected from the Syrian army. And what is now a daily occurrence, the death count rose today as 60 people were killed in the neighborhood of Baba Amr in the city of Homs, according to the local coordination committees.
The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights documented the names of 24 civilians who were killed in the neighborhood by the gunfire of the Syrian army. Meanwhile, residents of the neighborhood appealed to urgently open humanitarian corridors to rescue the hundreds of injured. Outside of Homs, Syrian security forces carried out an arrest campaign on the university campus of Aleppo after a student protest was launched from the Faculty of Electrical Engineering. A number of people were injured by the gunfire of the security forces. As for Idlib province, 2 citizens were killed after heavy machine guns were fired.
She went from bearing witness to the atrocities of the events in the Baba Amr neighborhood and reporting them to producing these events.
This is how American journalist Mary Colvin and French photographer Remy Ochlik joined the rank of journalists killed in the line of duty in Syria.
The killing of the 2 journalists was widely condemned from Paris to London. This is a reminder of the attempts to prevent journalists from conveying the message at any price. Mada Taha reports.
I'm on a street,
تسجيل صوتي يصف أحداثاً وضحايا.
An audio recording describes events and victims. It is undifferentiated from other recordings, except that the person who recorded the audio was killed only a few days after. Mary Colvin, an American war correspondent for Britain's Sunday Times, did not hesitate to carry out her journalistic duties. Today, she became the victim. Her fate was shared with Remy Ochlik, a French photographer who left behind photos recounting the stories he witnessed, but didn't have the opportunity to tell. Colvin and Ochlik died in a building shelled by Syrian forces in Baba Amru. The news of their death quickly generated media and international reactions.
This is a desperately sad reminder of the risks that journalists take to inform the world of what is happening and the dreadful events in Syria, and our thoughts should be with her family and with her friends.
Damascus's response was unusually quick. Syrian Information Minister Adnan Mahmoud said the authorities had no idea the 2 victims were on Homs or even in Syria. As for the opposition, it accused the Syrian authorities of targeting the journalists in a premeditated attack to prevent on-the-ground news from being reported. The media were the most prominent victims of the continuous shelling of Homs in the past few hours. In addition to the killing of an American journalist and her French colleague, journalist Rami Ahmed al-Sayed, mainly tasked with filming and broadcasting the events of Homs and Baba Amru, also died.
Like any other father, he took photos of his only daughter, Mariam. Rami, not even 30 years old, was snatched by the revolution, going from talking to his little daughter to addressing the world. He broadcast what Syrians were being subjected to. Children his daughter's age, elders, men and women. He was not content with merely photographing the events. The harder mission is to broadcast the images. His rooftop turned into a media center, transmitting the suffering of the victims to the world. The price of the truth was high. Every inch of his body held shrapnel wounds. But that price did not prevent his brother from continuing the mission.
From the very first days, he took a camera and started filming. He told me, "Get me a camera." He got the camera and started filming. May God have mercy on your soul. May God be with you, my brother. May you never be forgiven, Bashar. May God never forgive any of you. We are all Rami.
Rami was not the first witness to get killed, nor will he be the last. The documentation provided by the journalists of the Syrian Revolution lives on after their death, doing justice to the victims and condemning the executioner. Rami entered the most dangerous areas until the last moment of his life. He bid his farewell in the last message he sent to the administrator of the Sham news network.
I recorded for nearly 5 hours. There's genocide going on in Baba Amru. I don't want anyone to tell us our hearts are with you. I know that. We want campaigns to be held everywhere, inside and outside the country. People should go to their embassies everywhere. In an hour, Baba Amru will no longer exist. I expect this to be my last message.
Rami's Skype account was not interrupted. The torch was passed to someone else.
Homs will not surrender. Rami's death is not Homs' death, nor is it the death of the revolution. We were by Rami's side before his martyrdom. He mostly talked about the Almighty God.
Here, Rami documented the presence of tanks with the Arab observers. Who provided the more honest testimony? Arab observers or Rami? Yasser Abu Hilala, Al Jazeera, Amman.
Nearly a century after the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Western Israeli colonialism is powerless in front of the walls of Damascus, preventing colonial powers from reevaluating their divisive lines and producing a new foundation to tear apart the region.
أمام أسوار دمشق المنيعة بوحدة ووعي شعبها لما يحاك له من مخططات.
The people's unity and awareness render the country immune to the plots targeting its unity and coexistence. Faced with the walls of Damascus, Western Israeli colonialism is unable to complete plans aimed at dividing and tearing apart the region. The genocidal intentions, disguised as the people's freedom and democracy, were divulged by former head of Israel's National Security Council, Uzi Dayan. He blatantly called for dividing Syria into multiple mini-states, granting Israel plenty of opportunities to achieve its interests in the region. Dayan's statements, which come as part of a Western campaign to divide the region, reveal the reasons behind the targeting of Syria. This was confirmed by the American Armed Forces Journal that published detailed maps dividing Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia into mini-states in conflict with each other. This would allow Israel to gain control and superiority in the region. Syria is facing an attempt initiated by the West and Israel, with the complicity of some countries in the Gulf Cooperation Council, to weaken the Arab identity and then to undermine a number of countries and redraw the political borders to meet the U.S.'s requirements to maintain its hegemony over the world. It seems this hegemony is nearing its end at the threshold of Damascus. Syrians are beating their pickaxes on the body of U.S. conquest and restoring faith in civilization, just as they did to former invaders and occupiers. Within the framework of the targeting of the country's national, scientific, economic, and artistic talent, a group of armed terrorists assassinated entrepreneur Mahmoud Ramadan in front of his house in the Pharmacist Association area in Halab al-Jadida neighborhood of Aleppo. Our news reporter learned that a terrorist group returning to Idlib province in a car opened heavy fire on martyr Ramadan as he came out of his house, leading to his immediate martyrdom. Martyr Ramadan was born in 1969. He was married and had 3 sons and a daughter. He held a number of hotel management and tourism diplomas.
Five people were killed and over 30 were injured in demonstrations organized by Afghan citizens in Kabul, Konar, Logar, and Jalalabad to condemn the burning of copies of the Holy Quran by U.S. forces in Bagram Air Base.
In addition, Afghan parliament members protested inside parliament in the capital, Kabul. U.S. forces offered an apology that was rejected by Afghans.
The
flame of the Afghan people's anger reached the capital, Kabul. Children and youth took to the streets of the capital to condemn and protest the burning of copies of the Quran by American troops in the Bagram military base. Here, citizens are threatening to join the Taliban movement. They now believe the movement has become the only party that preserves their holy sites and recovers their rights.
We are against the Taliban, but we swear that if this action is repeated, we will all join the Taliban's ranks. And then these forces will not be able to stay one more minute in Afghanistan.
The Afghan parliament witnessed a protest by its members as well. Parliament members requested imams and mosques across Afghanistan to declare an armed jihad against U.S. forces and foreigners without retreat or any excuses.
I demand the imams of mosques to declare an armed jihad against America, the invading enemy, until it faces the same fate as the Soviets and leaves our country. Death to America.
It is expected for a delegation of Afghan figures selected by the Afghan president to head to the Bagram air base to investigate the incident. However, it is unexpected for popular Afghan anger to quickly dissipate. This is not the first time the Quran has been desecrated since the U.S. forces entered Afghanistan. Each time, Americans merely offer an apology, but don't put an end to the crime. Bakr Yunus, Al Jazeera, Kabul.
Calls continue for the trial of outgoing Yemeni ruler Ali Abdullah Saleh over crackdown on protesters during the country's revolution. The International Federation for Human Rights, FIDH, has urged the U.S. to probe the deadly crackdown. The rights group says the U.S. has an obligation to investigate the, quote, serious and credible allegations of torture and other widespread violations brought against Saleh. Meanwhile, in the southern city of Taiz, people took to the streets demanding Saleh's trial over the killing of large numbers of people during the revolution. This after a presidential election, which has been widely criticized for having Saleh's vice president, Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi, as the sole candidate. Saleh is now in New York to allegedly receive medical treatment. He gave up power in return for immunity from prosecution based on a Saudi-brokered deal in November. Amnesty International has accused Egyptian security forces of continuing brutal tactics used by the former regime of Hosni Mubarak. The UK-based rights group says the ruling junta has failed to rein in its security forces. It says riot police have used excessive force during the recent protests in the capital Cairo and the city of Suez. The protests followed the death of more than 70 football fans in Port Said in early February. In a statement, Amnesty also called the reform promises of military rulers to continue hollow in the face of killings of over 100 protesters during the past 5 months. With only 9 days to parliamentary elections in Iran, different groups are holding press conferences to inform the people of their plans and policies. Saman Kujuri takes a look at today's developments.
A countdown to the polling day. With only 9 days to the 9th parliamentary elections, the newly established front, called the Voice of Nation, held its first press conference to elaborate on its plans and policies for the better performance of the 9th parliament. The front, which has already introduced only 15 members, comprises the critics of President Ahmadinejad's government.
We formed the Voice of Nation Front because we think that principalists are not paying attention to the key points like freedom of expression and defending the rights of the nation. Also, we believe that most of MPs at the 8th Parliament have only been representing certain groups and factions and not the people. We want to change this situation.
The front believes in order to have a successful and powerful parliament, only candidates who are experts and have the power to supervise the government should be elected into the chamber. And this is possible only if the members of parliament are not affiliated to the government or any other center of power or wealth.
We want to address the issues that the nation is facing. We set up the front in order to give principalists a chance to have different voices. Our main supporters are the people, and financially we are not dependent on any certain group.
Also on the same day, representatives from 3 of the fronts, including the United Principalist Front, the Stability Front and the Reformist Front, Mardom Salari or Democracy, in a joint session at Tehran University answered the questions of students. 3,444 candidates are finally qualified to run in the parliamentary elections due on March 2nd. According to official reports, 700 reformists will also compete for seats at the 290-seat chamber. Under the law, the election campaign will officially start at 8 a.m. local time on February 23rd and will end at the same time on March the 1st.
According to the Interior Ministry, the voting process at 10% of constituencies nationwide takes place in a computerized way. Saman Kujuri, Press TV, Tehran.
Bahrain's political societies called on Bahrainis to gather in front of the UN headquarters in Al-Manama this afternoon under the slogan, Sovereignty of the People, to press ahead with the popular mobilization. Meanwhile, the regime suppressed a funeral procession on the island of Sitra. Bahrainis organized a demonstration in Canada demanding the downfall of the regime and an end to Saudi occupation. It's worth mentioning that Khalifa bin Salman al-Khalifa is the world's longest-serving prime minister, with more than 40 years in office.
Sitra Island is again defying the Saudi government-backed security siege and ban on protests. Residents took to the streets of Sitra in a massive demonstration to mourn martyr Mansour Salman Hassan, an elderly man who was killed by the regime's tear gas. The demonstrators defied security measures and chanted slogans demanding the downfall of the monarchy's regime.
The
chants that the regime forces and mercenaries couldn't bear to hear prompted security officers to fire tear gas and rubber bullets. The February 14th Youth Revolution Coalition that organised the march called on the Bahraini people to take part in angry demonstrations on the first anniversary of the martyrdom of Abed Reda Abu Hamid, who was killed by the gunfire of regime forces near Pearl Roundabout in the capital Manama. Meanwhile, the Bahraini opposition abroad held a massive demonstration in the Canadian city of Ottawa, denouncing the Saudi occupation of Bahrain. Hundreds of people from the Arab and Muslim communities took part in the march, which was launched from in front of the parliament and headed to the Saudi embassy. The demonstrators chanted slogans demanding the downfall of al-Assad's regime in Saudi Arabia and al-Khalifa's regime in Bahrain.
Demonstrators in Ottawa gathered in front of the Canadian Parliament and headed to the Saudi embassy. We condemn the intervention of the Saudi and the Peninsula Shield forces in Bahrain. We also condemn the measures by the al-Khalifa-led government in Bahrain. We are determined to continue our jihad and defend this revolution until all of its rights and demands are attained.
The protesters called on countries around the world and human rights organisations to immediately intervene and stop the bloodbath in Bahrain. They also demanded the withdrawal of the Saudi occupation from the country.
Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, insisted today that his country is not seeking to develop atomic weapons. Khamenei said his scientists have been instructed to continue their important nuclear work. The chief UN monitor probing Iran's rogue nuclear program ended his team's latest inspection tour after just 2 days. Herman Nackert said the hardline Islamic Republic has refused to cooperate with the IAEA. The group returned to Vienna saying Tehran had rejected the request to visit where it is believed that explosives testing was being conducted.
We tried to reach agreement on a way forward to resolve all the outstanding issues. And in particular, we discussed the possible military dimensions of Iran's nuclear program. We also tried to get access to a site that is relevant for our investigations. So we approached this trip in a constructive spirit. Unfortunately, we could not get agreement on either of them. So we could not get access, we could not finalize a way forward.
White House spokesman Jim Carney said the Obama administration remains determined to keep Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. But Carney stressed the need for Israel to allow more time for sanctions before launching a military strike.
Now we feel, as I've said and others have said, as most importantly the President has said, that there is time and space for diplomacy to work, for the effective sanctions to result in a change in Iranian behavior, an agreement by Iran to live up to its obligations, to engage in negotiations, and resolve this matter peacefully. We do not, of course, as we've said many times, take any option off the table.
And over at the State Department, officials downplayed any tensions between the U.S. and Israel over what is the best course of action towards Tehran.
Israel and the United States both believe that Iran has got to live up to its international obligations, and we're focused on the pressure we can bring to bear to make sure that happens.
But considering that the head of the DNI, James Clapper, is on his way to Israel this week, and there are reports now that Defense Minister Barak may be in Washington several days ahead of his expected appearance at the AIPAC conference week after next, it seems to suggest that there seems to be more talking and more persuading that needs to be done with the Netanyahu government.
You know, we've always had a very intense set of engagements with Israel, so this is just part and parcel of the conversation that we're having in all channels and at all levels, not only about Iran, of course, but about bilateral issues, about Syria, about the neighborhood. So it makes sense that various members of the U.S. government are meeting various members of the Israeli government in this season.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.